So I'd like to thank you all so much for joining us for this, our final session of Hofstra's Day of Dialogue. A major goal of Hofstra's Center for Civic Engagement is to foster a sense of agency and self-efficacy in the students who participate. And becoming efficacious in conventional forms of discussion is what is often thought of when we think of students getting involved in public issues. But as governments become more oppressive, they often restrict the arts, and they do so because it's an effective vehicle for protest and can provide a potent catalyst for discussion, dissent, and action. And that's why we are lucky today to feature the following event, directed by Hofstra drama student Margaret Engel and performed by her Hofstra peers, an event that focuses on the issue of human trafficking. My name is Philip Dalton. I'm the director of Hofstra's Center for Civic Engagement. And though today's events close with this performance, we invite you to begin your relationship with the center. You can learn more by Googling our name, Hofstra Center for Civic Engagement. Our student fellows post at that site their blogs and their podcasts focusing on issues of the day and issues they encounter in their work with our community partners. You can also stay up to date on our events by following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The Center for Civic Engagement is thankful to Hofstra University, the Provost's Office, and University Relations for the support of the center and its vision. Hofstra University's commitment to civic engagement is defining, and it affords us the resources to provide engaged learning opportunities, community-based research experiences, while inculcating members' values of service, sacrifice, and social justice. Today's events brought hundreds of people, albeit virtually, to the campus to discuss important issues with both experts and people with direct experience with those issues. And in so doing, we engage students and people across Long Island and further. And we've done so today, just days before what might be the most important election of our lifetimes. None of today's events could have come together without the constant effort, attention, and standards of Hofstra Cultural Center's Executive Director, Athleen Collins. And we're also thankful to the Center's Graduate Assistant for Civic Literacy on campus events, Callie Wynn, and Graduate Assistant for Community Partnerships and Off-Campus Initiatives, Gabby Rojas. And I also wish to recognize our Center for Civic Engagement Fellows who've been instrumental in setting up and marketing and administering each of today's events. In just moments after the performance, I'll post the link to our website and our social media accounts. If you want to follow them, I hope you will. Please follow us and join us for future events and discussions. And now it is my honor to introduce our moderator for this evening's event, Professor of Drama and Dance, Cindy Rosenthal. Cindy?
Thank you, Phil. Well, it's really my honor to be able to introduce Margaret Engel, who I was so thrilled to be able to be in a classroom. It started a live classroom, and then it became a Zoom classroom in the spring in a course that is titled Theater of the 21st Century. The world, of course, changed radically during our time together as we were looking at theater of the 21st century, and Margaret created a very moving, striking, important work as her final project. And that work, which she began last spring and worked on and presented in a Zoom format at the end of last semester, is what you're going to see in a further iteration now. Margaret is exactly the kind of person, as Phil was saying, that we Center for Civic Engagement folks are so excited to collaborate with. Margaret is an interdisciplinary artist, scholar, and activist, and that's exactly the community that I think we are building here. I just wanted to say something that earlier today there was an incredibly moving and informative panel, thanks to Carrie Jensen and a really remarkable sophomore student. I'm trying to remember her name. You'll have to tell. Oh, Sarah Sarah Stouffer, right? And there was a guest, a speaker who was a survivor, who was on a part of that panel, Trisha Grant, and she left us with some words that I will not forget, and indeed I think they continue to inspire us. Words that it's the people who you see in these Zoom tiles that are now, that are our future, and that are making work that matter, that we need to listen to. And I'm so happy and just excited that you're all going to get to witness something that's very special, an original work that Margaret wrote and that now she directed and cast with these very talented actors that you're going to see in a minute or two. So Margaret, I want to say one more word about you, which is that this young woman is a global studies, geography, and drama triple major at Hofstra. Margaret became interested in the topic of human rights and also trafficking when she was a freshman. And she's since dedicated her interdisciplinary studies towards using applied theater as a tool for education and social justice. It is truly my pleasure to introduce Margaret.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Cindy. And thank you guys all for coming. It's really, really an honor to be closing off Day of Dialogue. I always look forward to it every year. I went to a couple events today and it was just so enriching, even in this Zoom format. So I'm so happy it's still happening this semester. I will be talking more about the playwriting process and everything after we do the read through. Just a reminder, if everyone could keep their cameras off unless you are an actor during the performance, that would be wonderful. And so, yeah, without further ado, I would love for the actors to each introduce themselves and then we'll get right into the play. So thank you, everyone.
Hi, you guys. I'm Gabe. I am a sophomore. I'm a double major with psychology and drama, and I'm excited to be here today.
Hi, I'm Cameron. I'm a senior. I am a double major in drama and public relations, and I'm playing Girl.
Hi, I'm Hannah DeTono, and I'm a senior double major in drama and psychology, and I will be playing the older woman.
Hi, sorry about that. My name is Ariana Wentworth. I'm a sophomore at Hofstra. I'm a drama major and an English minor, and I will be reading the stage directions today. And with that, I think we're all set to go. So I will begin. Stained Glass by Margaret Engel. Characters. The girl, ideally between 12 and 14 years old. The young woman, between 17 and 25 years old. The woman, any age past 30. Setting, a cathedral. There are pews on either side of the stage with an altar sitting downstage center. To the left is a church tabernacle. A stained glass window overlooks the stage, created with the use of strategic lighting. As the play progresses, the glass will slowly fade and distort into other images and colors. Part 1. The Pretender. The three women, dressed in habits, enter from upstage carrying rosaries and walking in a line which descends by age. When they reach the altar, they raise their rosaries up in prayer for a moment, then look at one another, appreciating the other's company. They perform the sign of the cross. They place their rosaries back in their pockets. The young woman leaves and returns with a bin filled with flowers, pots, and plants. The three begin taking pots out of the bin and dressing the altar. The girl gazes at one of the pots filled with roses for a moment. There's a loud crash, and time suddenly stops. The stage darkens only to show the three women, frozen where they stand.
He who commits adultery lacks sense. He who does it destroys himself. He will get wounds and dishonor, and his disgrace will not be wiped away. Proverbs chapter 6, verses 32 to 33.
The stage lights up again, and the women continue to dress the altar.
The honeymoon period.
He was like a father. He took care of me.
My best friend.
It was really shit at home. It didn't matter what I did. It wasn't right. They drove me fucking crazy.
Lacking basic skills, having low self-esteem.
They would search my room and everything. My dad kept accusing me of taking drugs, which was bullshit. Even my grades weren't good enough.
Being distrustful of adults.
I couldn't stay there anymore. I had to leave. I didn't know where I was going, but I just had to get out.
He was my first.
Started buying me things, saying, I love you.
The older women throw loose flower petals from the bin onto the girl. The woman tucks a flower behind her hair. The three play like this for a while with the flowers until they all sit down in the front pews.
I was in love with him.
I had no choice.
He really loved me. I know it.
He gave me no other choice.
I can't go stand on the side of the road in the name of love, in the name of money. I have a future. Standing here, selling myself would destroy my life, my dignity, everything.
Part 2, The Provider. The stage lights up in such a way that it looks like streetlights passing by on a highway. The sound of a fast-moving car hums in the background, and some of the pieces of the stained glass begin disappearing. The other women get up from the pews and finish dressing the altar with flowers, but the girl stays sitting. She is in the passenger seat.
He would take me driving around in his car, took me out to dinner, and always made sure to pick up the bill. He made me feel like I was $1,000,000.
Some are nice.
He told me he loved me and that he would do anything for me. I told him I loved him too. He asked if I would do anything for him. I said yes.
Some are not.
I left home with $8 that I took from my mother's purse. She was just gonna spend it on booze anyway. I had an extra pair of pants and a shirt and an extra pair of shoes. I even forgot to bring fucking underwear. Can you believe it? But I brought my small teddy bear. Can you believe that?
He told me if I wanted to stay with him, I would have to start providing for him. Not for him, but for us.
Someone to take care of me.
Someone to take care of my daughter.
Us.
At age 13, what choices do I have?
The crashing noise again. Time freezes. The flowers are dressed in a beautiful arrangement around the altar. Part 3, The Promiser.
Now the works of the flesh are evident: sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality. Galatians chapter 5, verse 19.
Lights return, and the girl gets up from the pew to take a white cloth out of the bin. She carefully spreads it on the altar. The woman takes a candle lighter from the bin, along with several candlesticks. The young woman takes 2 candelabra and places them at opposite ends of the altar. They do this as they say the next several lines.
I can't go to a shelter. You have to be 18.
I can't go back to school. I was kicked out. I have no money.
He told me all about all the money I could make and all the wonderful places I could go. He talked about all the clothes I could buy. He then said it was my choice. I could just waste my life and be poor all my life, or take control and do something for myself. He said he would be around if I chose to become involved. I ended up seeing him the next night at the club, and I decided to give it a try.
This is gonna be my life.
It didn't seem so bad. I said yes that night, although I was wiped on coke.
This is what I was made for.
This is all I can do.
I just wanted to be a kid. So I ran away. I went to my friend's house and suddenly there was his car waiting for me. And then he started raping me and I was crying and I felt like it was my fault.
The woman holds her tightly.
My fault.
She lights one candle.
I shouldn't have acted like a kid and I shouldn't have disobeyed him.
My fault.
She takes the other candle and uses the flame of the other to light it.
At that point in time, this was his body. If he wanted to cut my foot off, he can cut my foot off. That's just how it felt.
And that was the new normal for me.
The candles are lit. Time freezes once again.
Do not profane your daughter by making her a prostitute, lest the land fall into prostitution and the land become full of depravity. Leviticus, chapter 19, verse 29.
Part 4. The Protector. The stained glass window changes color. The right side of the window turns a deep red, while the left becomes blue. The Star-Spangled Banner plays as background music. The woman stands by the girl as if they were mother and daughter. They both stand on the right side and face the young woman who stands on the left. This time, all three stay still, and there is a sharp ringing lasting throughout the duration of the next line.
They made the first girl stand in the middle of the room. They ordered her to take off her top. She hesitated, so they beat her. Then it was my turn. I lifted my top for a second and pulled it right down. Then I noticed the curtains fluttering out the open window. Time slowed. I heard a ringing in my ears and the room faded. I remember that I said a prayer, God, give me wings. I ran across the room and jumped over the men on the couch and out the window.
At age 13, what choices do I have?
All three turn to look at the tabernacle.
Do not get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 18.
Time unfreezes. Lights go up, but things seem different. The stained glass is cracked or missing. Moonlight streaming from the window engulfs the stage. The young woman performs the sign of the cross and opens the tabernacle to bring out the Eucharist and places it on the altar. The girl retrieves a pitcher of wine, carefully holding it as she brings it to the altar and takes a large swig from the pitcher before setting it down. The others follow suit.
He got me into drugs. He liked it when I was high. When I was high, I didn't really feel anything. I was a child making adult decisions. Every day I was looking for a way out.
Yes, I had sex 4 times with 2 different people for heroin. But then one time I went to get some heroin from these people and they forced me to give oral sex, anal sex. They physically forced me and threatened me. I knew these people. They were like family.
They approached me. Sometimes I felt pressured, but I wanted the drugs, and I needed to feel cared for.
Yes, I did, but it wasn't necessarily my intention. I slept with men for drugs and money for other things. Some were boyfriends and some were other men.
I'd been in and out of jail more times than I can count.
You start to recognize faces after a while.
Establishing a rapport with a victim of human trafficking may be complicated by a lack of shared experiences between the interviewer and victim.
As the woman, now holding a clipboard and pen, speaks on one side of the stage, the girl ties up the young woman in her chair with rope on the other side. The young woman appears unmoved by this action, almost as if she doesn't even realize it's happening. Even as she changes position in her chair, the rope stays tight around her until it's nearly suffocating her in place.
A lack of common experiences makes it difficult to talk about neutral subjects. This is likely to be a difficulty with many vulnerable victims, but even more likely in human trafficking cases due to cultural differences.
He kept reminding us of what would happen if we fucked with him. He would always take his knife out and play around with it. We knew what he meant.
In cases of trafficking for sexual exploitation, talking about sex is difficult in any culture. In trafficking, in persons' cases, the cultural background of the victim may be one where sex is never discussed at all.
He told me I would have to pay him $4,000 if I wanted to leave.
You should be prepared for such cases.
By now, the girl has tied the rope so tightly around the young woman that she begins choking. The girl nor the woman help her. Rather, they just stare at her blankly. Finally, she manages to break out of the ropes and falls to the floor, still gasping for air. Part 5. The Punisher.
Despite laws in every state that enable the prosecution of individuals who purchase sex with a minor, function as exploiters and traffickers, or otherwise sexually exploit children and adolescents, and despite the hard work of prosecutors and law enforcement in many jurisdictions, individuals who sexually exploit children and adolescents have largely escaped accountability.
As she speaks, the church slowly transforms into a courtroom. The stained glass turns into flickering fluorescent lighting, and an American flag stands beside the altar. The girl sits at the front pew, handcuffed. The young woman sits next to her. She is the girl's lawyer. The woman sits in a chair at the altar and bangs a gavel. Court is now in session. Once the woman begins speaking, she swivels her chair to face the audience.
Some years ago, a defendant in a domestic violence case pending in my court was the victim's pimp. The victim was sitting in the first row of the courtroom waiting to speak to the prosecutor. When the case was called, the defendant calmly walked toward the bench and, as he reached the first row, stopped by the victim, cocked his fist, and knocked her unconscious.
There is a loud crash and the girl falls to the floor.
She lay motionless on the floor as dozens of court officers, attorney, litigants, and one bewildered judge looked on. He could have done this to her on the street, but instead he chose to do it in the courtroom to send a message. I own you, and no one can protect you from me. Not the police, not the prosecutor, and certainly not the person in the black robe sitting under the sign that reads, "In God We Trust."
I shouldn't have acted like a kid, and I shouldn't have disobeyed him.
The other women blow out the candles.
My fault.
She removes her habit.
If he wanted to cut my foot off, he'd cut my foot off.
She removes her habit.
I was in love with him.
She gets up and removes her habit.
This is what I was
made for.
Prostitutes, otherwise known as whores, hookers,
Hoes, harlots,
women of the street,
and working girls have been around since the beginning of civilization. Prostitution is notoriously known as the world's oldest profession, source of income for thousands of women in the United States.
I'm so sad. I'm under so much pressure. I don't know what to do. I just want to be free. I want it to be over, even just for one day.
Do not profane your daughter by making her a prostitute, lest the land fall into prostitution and the land become full of depravity. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 29.
End. Blackout with only the projection. Okay, so that is the script in its entirety. It's pretty short, but I think it kind of gets the job done. So I'll say a couple words about it before we go into questions. So Stained Glass started as a final project for Cindy's modern drama class, and the prompt was pretty flexible and just asked us to create a project centered around a specific playwright or play or an original script that focused on the types of theater we'd studied over the course of the semester. Over my 3.5 years at Hofstra, I've always been pretty adamant about making my coursework as interdisciplinary as possible, as Cindy said. And as a freshman, I'd taken globalization and human trafficking with Dr. Linda Longmire while I was studying abroad on a trip called the European Odyssey.
and to learn for the first time, essentially, about sex trafficking and the way that it manifests differently across cultures and borders and identities and the like, the more that I connected the things that I'd learned overseas to the things that I'd experienced growing up in my hometown of Syracuse. I dived into research about trafficking in the United States and read so many stories of victims who were the same age as me or younger by the time they got out. And, you know, stories about people who lived just miles from my own home and faced challenges that I'd never even considered growing up. And so the quotes in this play about characters' stories and feelings about their experiences are the real words of real sex trafficking victims. And that's kind of the driving agent of this whole script. And I'll say this, it's a massive privilege that I have that I can sit down and take a bunch of quotes that aren't my own and create a story out of something that I personally have never had to experience. But if I can use that to promote awareness about this very unique and real and intersectional type of trauma, then I will, and it's something that I hope to continue to do in the future. And so for those who were unable to attend, former victim turned anti-trafficking activist Trisha Grant earlier today, her incredibly powerful story for Day of Dialogue provided really great insight into the trauma that victims go through. She also really showed that trafficking isn't always just suddenly being scooped up on the side of the road and taken. It's this long sequence of events and life knocking you down again and again until sometimes you don't even realize it's happening until it's too late. And so that sense of ambiguity is kind of what I wanted to explore in the play. The three characters portrayed by these wonderful actors don't have names. They are gendered in the play to draw attention to abuse and objectification towards nuns in the Catholic Church, but really any production of this could change the genders or abolish gender entirely for the characters because, you know, it affects people of different backgrounds and identities in disproportionate ways. And it's an issue that's found its way across class and race and gender and religion. So that's definitely something I want to highlight. While writing this play, I got a lot of quotes from a documentary that I just am completely enamored by. It's titled Very Young Girls, and it's a 2007 expose of trafficking in the New York City area, directed by David Shiskel and Nina Alvarez. I also poured through so many journal articles and reports from anti-trafficking organizations, hospital guidelines for trafficking, as well as court cases across the country. I really wanted to, in the script, juxtapose the quotes from the actual victims with the sort of analytical formal language from the other data outlets that I had. Because as important as statistics are in the field of anti-trafficking and human rights in general, it can often be very distracting and almost desensitizing to what's actually going on and the trauma that victims are actually facing. Also, the average person who takes an interest in human rights and trafficking probably isn't going to take the time to go through like the Polaris Project's annual report. They're probably going to seek out information from the arts and film, television, documentaries. So that's why I think using art as a tool like this is so important. I also wanted to split the play up into 5 general components. I'd actually read about them in a 2016 CNN article about trafficking. And each component takes a different type of coercion that pimps utilize to lure young, impressionable kids and teens most often into sex trafficking. These types are the pretender, the provider, the promiser, the protector, and finally the punisher. It's also important to note that people can take on multiple roles at once. For example, punishing and harming a victim in the name of protecting them. Some of the most impactful quotes that I used were those where victims referred to their abusers as their best friends, or like a father, or their first love. And that's exactly the masks that pimps and abusers can put on. And that's why so many victims don't even realize it's happening, sometimes until years later. So those are some of the things that I had in mind while writing this play. And obviously in another timeline, it could have been put to blocking with a real set, but we do what we can in these very unprecedented times. But it's also important to keep in mind the ways that COVID is affecting sex trafficking in the United States. People talk a lot about the domestic abuse cases rising in the country, but not a lot of people really understand how sex trafficking is evolving throughout the country and throughout the world. You think of the economy in decline and the loss of jobs with the demand of rent payments and bills, and inevitably that's going to lead to a huge increase in sex trafficking. Which is going to lead to an increase in victims vulnerable to not only sex trafficking in general, but now to COVID-19. And it's an issue that should be talked about regardless of political party or identity. So I hope that people who watched this were able to learn something new about trafficking and, keep it in mind as this pandemic rages. And I'm so appreciative of the cast who I carefully picked, knowing their acting ability as well as their ability to connect with the characters they play. So it was really an honor to just put my complete trust in them, and it has clearly paid off over the rehearsals and over this performance. So yeah, now we can open up to any questions. If you would like to raise your hand, you can do so by going to the participants list. And then it should be like at the bottom left to raise your hand. And if not, you can also just write it in the chat box. Okay, I see a hand from Grace. So you can go ahead and turn your camera on. Grace Clark, yes. Okay. I think Grace.
I accidentally put their hand down because I couldn't unmute them. I don't have the ability.
Oh, no worries. Interesting. Let me try to do that.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. I just want to say nice job to everyone. One of the actors, I don't know if you want me to say, is my daughter. I'm just very honored to have been able to watch you guys. I'm trying to see if I see her face looking as I'm talking. Yes, she is. Okay. Just really nice job. I had a couple questions. One is, how long did it take you to write this piece? And what did the actors do to prepare such an intense topic? And lastly, I just want to commend you for bringing it to the forefront. I don't think as women, we talk about it enough. As a world, we don't talk about it enough. It's very prevalent. It doesn't go anywhere. It's not going to end unless, we really continue to raise it to the forefront. And so I want to commend you for doing that. And I thought all of the actors did great. But again, I just want to know how long it took and what did the actors do to prepare for such a riveting topic? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I kind of started the writing process by just doing the research and getting as many quotes that I felt would contribute to the story. I think it probably took me like a week to write, but I always wait until the last minute. So I think like the night before it was due, I wrote the bulk of it. But yeah, if any actors want to speak on their experiences.
It was just really great having Margaret help and like guide us through this process, because obviously she knows so much about all of this stuff. And it was an honor to like work with her and hear her insights into the script and just putting all the pieces together. And I think she did a fabulously like methodical way. And I just wanted to and me and my fellow actors also wanted to make sure that her words and the words of victims were being portrayed the best that they could, you know.
I tried to make sure that I knew as much as possible about the psychological aspects of sex trafficking. I know Margaret helped us with that a lot. I also went into the script and tried to figure out what intention I can say each line, like where my character could be more naive or more masked by love or trauma bond, or where she actually feels bad for her abuser at the same time, and times where she finds strength within herself, but sort of internal conflict. So I really worked on that.
I think the same as like what Hannah and also Cameron are saying is that I worked more on like thinking about the background of this, because something that I have not personally experienced, but being able to use the things that I have experienced, like racism or homophobia and things like that, and talk about how these experiences have impacted me in my own life, and how these other incidents could also impact a lot of people of color as well who were involved with being sex trafficked and things that they have experienced. And I'd also like to say thank you to Margaret again for having such a thorough like background when she did approach me, and of course my fellow actors with this. And she just done an amazing job, and I cannot praise her enough for educating me and educating you guys too.
Thank you, Gabe. Ariana, if you want to speak as well.
Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't sure if I could unmute myself from the location I'm in. But I guess just this entire process has been really, really cool. And if I'm being completely honest, well, obviously, Margaret, I think you've been doing a wonderful job. I love your passion with this project. And I know that all of us, just in the fact of just being in it, like everything that we have to learn and understand. And that's the point of this as a piece of art, is that it's meant to make people think and understand and learn about something that they might not have experience with. I think that's very powerful. I also just wanted to talk about I think the frustration of, you know, being on Zoom, but I think especially because I'm reading stage direction, I'm not a character that's necessarily been in what's happening. I'm just saying of talking about this more from an acting perspective, but the fact that I'm in Zoom and I am physically distanced from the people that I'm working with, in addition to as a character just reading the stage directions as if I am only observing the events, I think that just that as an idea is just very powerful, in that me reading stage directions is like everybody else kind of watching it. Like they're just observing with the rest of us. I'm kind of in the know, but it's just a place of where we need to observe and learn and just you know, figure out more about something that's so important, especially important during COVID with everything, and just being able to learn about that more and just have that be still something that we think about despite everything else going on.
Yeah, definitely. So I see a question in the chat box that says, how do you see your future involved in helping awareness for the problem? And definitely, just as I was saying before, like applied theater is such a useful tool for social justice and calling for reform and action. So I, in my research, know that there's a lot of really good organizations across the country, but you know, I'm very focused on the New York City area, doing like amazing global initiatives using theater. So I definitely want to get involved in that in the future, but also, you know, there's a pandemic going on. And then another question that says, that as a question for the actors, what was it like to read these characters' lines with the knowledge that these are the words of real people, and how did that influence your performance?
I can start. So I feel like something that's very important when we have like quotes from like real people and their real experiences is remembering the reason why we're like why Margaret has really brought this together. And it's because a lot of people are silenced in their own ways through like sexual trafficking and other things. And the idea that while we're giving them like a voice, we're not saying that like, hey, I'm gonna be the person to take on all these people and I can save them all, but I'm helping to add to the voice, because the more voices, the more louder it gets and the more attention that is drawn to this matter. So I think that was something that was very striking of Margaret to add, was to have like the actual quotes and stories of people instead of just like, you know, paraphrasing, and it adds more power to the performance really. and something that really made me think harder about the things that I was saying and the things that also the woman and the girl were saying as well.
It was definitely a really raw experience to be reading their actual words. Margaret, you're so brilliant for even putting this together. I think that was incredible that you added that, because that adds so much truth, like how Gabe was saying, to the play. And it really made me just think about their perspective so much more than like the average play.
Yeah, definitely. I have to agree. It was kind of like eye-opening, because if you're not like studying this kind of thing, it's just interesting to hear and like really understand. So just adding a voice to those words was really, really inspiring, and just trying to like get those people's words heard and everything, like Gabe said, just trying to make everything as loud as possible and bring awareness to it. And I think we did a great job with it. But we, definitely can keep going.
I was going to say, being in a performance that is using this kind of language with, again, as my fellow actors have already said, putting the truth behind it and that they're actual quotes. Something that I thought was very, very powerful about this piece and the usage of quotes, which again, Margaret, you're wonderful, you're very brilliant, was just the fact that, and I guess is also is on the idea of the fact that this piece is eye-opening, is that there are real human beings in the world, and this is coming from my, very privileged, safe kind of upbringing of perspective. There are people in the world that can tell these stories with truth. There are people in the world that have gone through these experiences, and it can almost be conversational how intense their lives have been and are. And I think that's just something that, again, makes this even more powerful as a piece, a performance piece, is that it takes something that is very, very intense and raw and obviously important, but then by bringing it to audiences that have no idea what these experiences are like, it's like, no, this is actually the normal for some people. And I think that's what makes it that much more I guess just shocking, but not like in a bad way, in a educational way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Just everything you guys are saying is so true. Another question says, do you have any playwrights or plays that inspired you when creating this play? Absolutely. I mean, truly, all the plays that we had studied in Cindy's modern drama class were really, really impactful. I had learned for the first time what like devised theater was, which for those of you who don't know, it's kind of just taking things from the outside world and working together as a team to create a piece of art. And I've always thought that that was really inspiring and useful for applied theater. Definitely the work of like George Brant, for anyone who's read the play Grounded, the work of Sarah Rule. And then I kind of wanted to incorporate a sense of like epic theater into it and have it have almost like a Brechtian feel. So those were definitely some of the inspirations for it. That's all I have to say about that.
I see another question. It was sent privately from my mom instead of to everyone. But it says, any thought about touring this play to other colleges or young women's groups, even during the pandemic?
I mean, I usually like to take things one day at a time, but I mean, I'm always open to the idea of, working on it and reformatting it for a different audience or stage setup or anything like that. So who knows? I don't see any hands in the list. Oh, yes, Dr. Longmire. Oh, you are muted. Wait.
Linda, you're muted.
I don't know what to do.
I can't
Oh,
unmute
we can
you.
hear you. We can hear you. Start
Can
over.
you hear me now? I'm just really looking forward to you coming to the human trafficking class and sharing the play. And as everyone has said, it's such a wonderful intersection between art and the real and rather horrible world out there and education. And all those dimensions come together in this wonderful place. So I'm really looking forward to that and hoping that it also can open doors to more work that addresses the urgent issue of human trafficking out there in the world. So it'll be interesting to see people's reactions, and I'm really excited about that. And of course, enormously thrilled that you've done this. So, as everyone has said.
Thank you. Yes, I also peer teach Dr. Longmire's trafficking class now, so that's been very helpful in this process. I see a hand from Dr. Jensen.
Yes, thank you. I don't really have a question. I just wanted to say how wonderful I think this play was, Margaret. Great job. And I was so impressed by the performances, because this is such a heavy topic that even just talking about it is often tearing me up. And sometimes I have been tearing up in class even over this topic. And I think that is nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, we are human beings, not robots. But I must say, when you, the three actors, were acting out those lines where you were crying, you know, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so real. It seemed so real, just both how you looked and how you sounded. And I also really liked the very kind of neutral look and feel of the stage direction, so stage director. So I think it was just wonderful. And I agree with the suggestion of bringing it to other college campuses and other groups of young people. I think this will really touch a string in many people. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, these actors are so wonderful. I'm so pleased with this cast. Oh, another question. Oh, it's just a comment. But yes, for anyone who came to Trisha Grant's talk today, it was mind-blowing and insane and so wonderful. So I don't see any more hands in the chat. So I think that would be the end of this event. Once again, thank you so much. Thank you to CCE for everything. It was such an honor to do this. I'm such a huge fan of Day of Dialogue. That's it. Thank you, everyone. Oh, Dr. Jensen, sorry.
Actually, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to have you look at the chat box, because there was one more question. It was about the 5 parts of the play, and if you could repeat what those were. It was a question from Ginny Nella.
Yes, I'm so sorry. Yes, okay. So the 5 parts of the play that I wanted to split it up and make that kind of the layout of the script were the pretender, the provider, the promiser, the protector, and finally the punisher. And they all kind of take on different roles with a victim and coerce in different ways. And once again, as I said earlier, you can take on multiple roles at once. And it can seem like you are protecting someone while you're actually punishing them, or even vice versa. So that's kind of the insidious way that pimps work on their victims. And so I just thought that was really interesting when I read it. And I had read it after I had made the original script, and I needed to completely reformat everything just so I could include that. So yeah. Cool. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I was going to post links for everybody so that they could.
Yeah.
And I can't. Oh. There we go. Please follow us, and thanks so much. That was fantastic. Good job. Now I have to go to bed. Exhausting day. It went well. Thank you all. Have a good day. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Okay. Thank you to the cast. Thank you guys so much. I love you. You're wonderful. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you. Thank you. Cool. Peace out. Everyone have a wonderful night.
Thank
Bye,
you so
thank you.
much.